In the sun-baked deserts of southern Iraq, beneath layers of sand and time, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that challenge our understanding of humanity's earliest civilizations. Mysterious figurines that seem to blur the line between human and reptile, created by hands that lived over 7,000 years ago. The Ubaid period, spanning from approximately 6,500 to 3,800 BCE, represents one of humanity's first steps toward organized society in ancient Mesopotamia. This was an era before the wheel, before writing, before the great ziggurats that would later define the landscape. Yet the people of this time possessed sophisticated pottery skills, developed complex irrigation systems, and created art that continues to perplex scholars today. During this formative period, settlements dotted the fertile marshlands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Archaeological evidence reveals a society in transition, hunter-gatherers evolving into farmers, small villages growing into proto-urban centers. But among the typical artifacts of daily life, pottery shards, tools, and burial goods, excavators began discovering something entirely unexpected. The initial find came in the 1920s, when British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley was excavating the ancient site of Ur. Among the usual collection of pottery and household items, his team uncovered small clay figurines unlike anything previously documented. These objects, standing roughly 6 to 7 inches tall, depicted humanoid figures with distinctly reptilian characteristics: elongated skulls, large eyes, and what appeared to be scaled or textured skin. But Ur was just the beginning. As excavations expanded across the Mesopotamian region throughout the 20th century, similar figurines emerged from multiple Ubaid sites: Tel al-Ubaid, Eridu, Uruk, and Tel Madhur. Each discovery added to a growing collection that now numbers in the hundreds, all sharing remarkably consistent features despite being created across different locations and potentially spanning several centuries. The figurines themselves present a fascinating anatomical puzzle. Most are depicted as female forms, often in poses suggesting childbirth or nursing. Their bodies are recognizably human-wide hips, defined waists, pronounced breasts. Yet their heads tell a different story entirely. The skulls are elongated and conical, sometimes featuring what appears to be a ridge or crest running along the top. The eyes are large, almond-shaped, and positioned differently than typical human proportions would suggest. Some figurines display what archaeologists interpret as protective or ceremonial poses: arms crossed, hands positioned as if holding objects that have not survived the millennia. Others appear to be in motion, as if caught mid-gesture in some long-forgotten ritual. The craftsmanship varies, suggesting these were not mass-produced but individually created, each bearing the subtle differences that mark human artistry. Perhaps most intriguingly, several figurines appear to be holding or nursing smaller versions of themselves, infant figures with the same reptilian characteristics. This detail has sparked considerable debate among researchers about whether these represent mythological beings, religious symbols, or something else entirely. The absence of written records from the Ubaid period makes interpretation particularly challenging. Unlike later Mesopotamian civilizations, which left extensive cuneiform tablets describing their beliefs and practices, the Ubaid people communicated their worldview primarily through material culture. The figurines, therefore, represent one of our few windows into their spiritual and cultural beliefs. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an archaeologist specializing in prehistoric Mesopotamia, suggests these figurines may represent fertility goddesses or protective deities. The nursing poses and apparent pregnancy indicators suggest these figures played a role in rituals related to childbirth and child-rearing, she explains. In many ancient cultures, supernatural beings were depicted with exaggerated or non-human features to emphasize their otherworldly nature. Other scholars propose the figurines might represent shamanic practices. In this interpretation, the reptilian features could symbolize transformation, the ability of spiritual practitioners to take on animal characteristics during ritual states. Serpents and lizards held significant meaning in many ancient cultures, often associated with rebirth, healing, and wisdom. The consistent reptilian features across multiple sites and time periods suggest these characteristics held deep cultural significance. In later Mesopotamian mythology, serpent-like beings appear frequently, from the healing god Ningishzida, often depicted with serpent characteristics, to various protective spirits described in magical texts. This raises the intriguing possibility that the Ubaid figurines represent the earliest known expression of serpent symbolism in human religious thought. Some researchers have noted the similarity between these figurines and reptilian imagery found in other ancient cultures worldwide. The feathered serpent of Mesoamerica, the Naga of Southeast Asian traditions, and various dragon mythologies all feature serpent-like beings with human characteristics. Whether this represents independent cultural development or suggests deeper, more ancient connections remains an open question. Recent advances in archaeological science have provided new tools for understanding these enigmatic objects. Thermoluminescence dating has confirmed the antiquity of many specimens, while chemical analysis of the clay has revealed information about their geographic origins. Some figurines appear to have been made from local materials, while others show evidence of having been traded across considerable distances. Microscopic analysis has revealed fascinating details about their construction. Tool marks suggest the use of both sculpting instruments and fingers, indicating a careful, deliberate creation process. Traces of pigments on several specimens suggest they were once painted, though the original colors have long since faded. Three-dimensional scanning technology now allows researchers to study the figurines without risking damage to these fragile artifacts. Digital reconstructions have revealed subtle details invisible to the naked eye, including possible textile impressions and evidence of how they might have been displayed or used in their original context. Despite decades of study, fundamental questions about the Ubaid lizard figurines remain unanswered. Were they representations of deities, shamanic totems, or mythological beings? Did they serve practical purposes in rituals, or were they purely symbolic objects? Most puzzling of all, why did this distinctive artistic tradition apparently disappear with the end of the Ubaid period, leaving later Mesopotamian cultures with entirely different religious iconography? The figurines continue to challenge our assumptions about early human civilization and spiritual development. They remind us that our ancestors possessed rich inner lives and complex belief systems that may be fundamentally different from anything we can easily comprehend today. As archaeologists continue to uncover new sites and develop more sophisticated analytical techniques, each discovery brings the potential for new insights into these mysterious objects. Yet perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Ubaid lizard figurines is not what they might eventually reveal about the past, but what they suggest about the enduring human need to give form to the ineffable, to create physical representations of truths that words alone cannot capture. In the silent galleries where these ancient figurines now reside, their oversized eyes continue to gaze into a future they could never have imagined. Guardians of secrets that died with their creators, waiting for someone to finally understand what they were meant to convey across the vast expanse of time. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates River once carved its path through a landscape of mud-brick cities and fertile plains, archaeologists have spent over a century searching for perhaps the most elusive of all ancient wonders, a marvel that may never have existed where history claims to remember it. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon stand among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, described by classical writers as a breathtaking cascade of greenery rising in terraced splendor above the desert city. According to tradition, these magnificent gardens were built around 600 BCE by King Nebuchadnezzar II as a gift for his wife, Queen Amytis of Media, who longed for the lush hills and valleys of her homeland. Ancient Greek historians painted vivid pictures of this engineering marvel, Strabo wrote of trees reaching the height of city walls, their roots extending deep into artificially constructed soil. Diodorus Siculus described a complex system of chambers and galleries, rising tier upon tier like a green mountain in the midst of an arid landscape. Quintus Curtius Rufus detailed an intricate irrigation network that somehow lifted water from the Euphrates River to nourish gardens suspended high above the ground. These accounts describe an achievement that would challenge even modern engineering, a multi-story botanical paradise, complete with sophisticated hydraulics, all constructed using the technology available over 2.5 millennia ago. The descriptions are so detailed, so consistent across multiple sources, that for centuries scholars accepted their existence as historical fact. Yet as archaeologists began systematic excavations of ancient Babylon in the 19th and 20th centuries, a troubling picture emerged. Despite the garden's supposed magnificence and central importance to the city, contemporary Babylonian records remain strangely silent about their existence. The famous Ishtar Gate, reconstructed in museums worldwide, bears no mention of hanging gardens. The detailed building inscriptions of Nebuchadnezzar II catalogue his architectural achievements with pride: the magnificent palaces, the processional way, the massive walls that protected the city. But nowhere in these contemporary accounts, carved in cuneiform by the king's own scribes, do the hanging gardens appear. This absence becomes even more puzzling when considered alongside the wealth of administrative records discovered in Babylon's ruins. Clay tablets document everything from royal correspondence to tax records, from religious ceremonies to construction projects. Palace inventories list exotic trees and plants maintained in royal gardens at ground level. Yet no mention appears of the elaborate suspended terraces described by later Greek writers. Dr. Robert Koldewey, the German archaeologist who conducted the most extensive excavations of Babylon in the early 1900s, spent years searching for physical evidence of the gardens. His team uncovered the foundations of Nebuchadnezzar's palaces, mapped the city's layout, and documented its water systems. While they found evidence of gardens at ground level, complete with irrigation channels and exotic plant remains, nothing emerged to support the existence of the multi-tiered hanging wonder described in classical texts. In recent decades, a compelling alternative theory has emerged from the scholarly work of Dr. Stephanie Daly of Oxford University. Through meticulous examination of ancient texts and archaeological evidence, she has proposed that the hanging gardens were real, but they were never in Babylon at all. Daly's research suggests the gardens were actually located in Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, some 300 miles north of Babylon. According to her theory, the gardens were built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib around 700 BCE, a century before the traditionally accepted date, and in an entirely different city. The evidence supporting this radical reinterpretation is surprisingly robust. Sennacherib's own inscriptions, discovered in the ruins of his palace at Nineveh, describe in detail the construction of a wonder for all peoples. He boasts of creating an artificial mountain covered with every kind of aromatic tree and herb, irrigated by bronze water wheels and channels that brought water from distant mountains. Archaeological excavations at Nineveh have revealed the remains of an extraordinary aqueduct system, a 50-mile network of canals, dams, and bridges that brought fresh water from mountain springs to the royal palaces. The engineering sophistication of this system, with its precise gradients and innovative arch construction, demonstrates exactly the kind of hydraulic expertise that would have been necessary to maintain elevated gardens. The confusion between Babylon and Nineveh in classical sources may stem from the complex political geography of ancient Mesopotamia. After the fall of the Assyrian Empire in 612 BCE, Babylon emerged as the dominant power in the region. Later, Greek historians, writing centuries after the events they described, may have conflated the achievements of these two great Mesopotamian civilizations. The error could have been perpetuated by the tendency of ancient writers to rely on earlier sources rather than first-hand investigation. As stories were passed down and retold, the magnificent gardens of the defeated Assyrian capital may have been attributed to the more famous and long-lasting Babylonian Empire. Linguistic analysis supports this theory of confusion. The Assyrian word for hanging in Sennacherib's inscriptions is dalu, which can also mean prominent or outstanding. Later translators may have interpreted this literally as hanging, when the original meaning referred to gardens that were simply elevated or prominent within the palace complex. Recent excavations and remote sensing technology have provided new insights into both potential locations. At Babylon, German and Iraqi archaeologists have used ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery to map subsurface structures throughout the ancient city. While these surveys have revealed previously unknown buildings and installations, they have not uncovered evidence of the massive substructures that would have been necessary to support hanging gardens. In contrast, excavations at Nineveh have revealed increasingly sophisticated evidence of Sennacherib's water management systems. British archaeologists working in the region have documented not only the famous aqueduct at Jerwan, but also an intricate network of smaller channels and reservoirs that brought water directly to the royal palace complex. Core samples taken from the palace area at Nineveh have revealed layers of enriched soil containing pollen from exotic plants, exactly what one might expect to find in the location of ancient botanical gardens. Chemical analysis of these soil layers suggests the presence of plants that would not naturally occur in the local environment, supporting the theory that exotic species were artificially cultivated there. The question of the hanging garden's true location touches on fundamental issues about how historical memory is created and preserved. If Daly's theory is correct, it suggests that one of history's most famous monuments was not only mislocated, but misattributed for over 2,000 years. Yet even this seemingly conclusive evidence leaves room for doubt. Some scholars argue that the gardens could have existed at both locations, that Sennacherib's achievement at Nineveh inspired Nebuchadnezzar to create his own version at Babylon, which was then lost to time and erosion. Others suggest that the classical descriptions combine elements from multiple Mesopotamian gardens, creating a composite wonder that never existed in reality. The debate continues as new archaeological techniques reveal previously hidden aspects of both ancient cities. Each season brings fresh excavations, new scientific analyses, and the possibility of discoveries that could finally resolve this enduring mystery. What remains certain is that somewhere in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, beneath layers of sand and centuries of accumulated debris, physical evidence waits to confirm or deny the classical accounts. Until that evidence emerges, the hanging gardens remain suspended not in air, but in the uncertain space between historical record and archaeological proof. A reminder that even our most cherished historical certainties may be built on foundations far less solid than we imagine. In a small room within the Weld Blundell collection at Oxford's Ashmolean Museum, a modest clay prism holds one of history's most perplexing documents, an ancient text that claims to record the reigns of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years, challenging everything we understand about early civilization and the nature of historical record-keeping itself. The Sumerian king list, inscribed in cuneiform script around 2100 BCE, presents itself as a straightforward historical chronicle. It begins with a simple, authoritative statement. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king. He ruled for 20,800 years. This opening line establishes a pattern that continues throughout the document's earliest entries. The second king, Alangar, ruled for 36,000 years. The third, Enmen-Luana, held power for 43,200 years. As the list progresses through the antediluvian period, the time before the Great Flood, it records 8 rulers whose combined reigns total an astronomical 241,200 years. The document exists in multiple copies discovered across various Mesopotamian sites, with the most complete version inscribed on a four-sided clay prism found at Lhasa. Despite minor variations between different copies, the extraordinary reign lengths remain consistent across all versions, suggesting these numbers were not scribal errors, but deliberate, meaningful components of the text. What makes these numbers particularly intriguing is their mathematical structure. Rather than random large figures, the reign lengths follow specific patterns based on the Sumerian base 60 number system. Most of the antediluvian reign lengths are multiples of 3,600, a number holding special significance in Mesopotamian mathematics as 602, representing a perfect square in their sexagesimal system. Dr. Hermann Hilprecht, one of the first scholars to analyze the king list systematically, noted that these numbers appear to be carefully calculated rather than arbitrarily assigned. Alulim's 28,800-year reign equals 8 x 3,600. Alangar's 36,000 years represents exactly 10 x 3,600. This mathematical precision suggests the numbers served a purpose beyond simple chronological record-keeping. The pattern extends beyond individual reigns to the total duration of the antediluvian period. The combined 214,200 years equals 67 x 3,600, while alternative calculations yield numbers that correspond to significant astronomical cycles known to Mesopotamian mathematicians. This level of numerical sophistication indicates that whoever composed the king list possessed advanced mathematical knowledge and used it deliberately in structuring these seemingly impossible reign lengths. The most dramatic element of the Sumerian king list occurs at a pivotal moment in its narrative. Then the flood swept over. This single line marks a fundamental transition in the document's structure and the nature of the reigns it records. Before the flood, kings rule for tens of thousands of years. After the flood, reign lengths drop precipitously to hundreds of years, then gradually decrease to more historically plausible durations. The first post-flood king, Jushur of Kish, ruled for 1,200 years, still extraordinary, but representing a dramatic reduction from pre-flood standards. This pattern continues as the list progresses through successive dynasties. By the time it reaches historically documented rulers of the late 3rd millennium BCE, the reign lengths have normalized to realistic human lifespans. Sargon of Akkad, whose existence is confirmed by contemporary inscriptions, is credited with a 56-year reign, a figure that aligns with other historical evidence. The flood narrative thus serves as more than a simple chronological marker. It represents a fundamental shift in the nature of kingship itself, from a divine or semi-divine institution characterized by impossibly long reigns to a human political system operating within normal temporal constraints. Scholars have proposed numerous theories to explain the king list's extraordinary early reign lengths. Some suggest they represent compressed genealogies, that individual kings actually represent entire dynasties, with the reign length indicating the total duration of a ruling family's power rather than a single monarch's lifespan. Others propose astronomical explanations. Dr. Giorgio de Santillana argued that the numbers encode sophisticated knowledge of celestial cycles, particularly the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year astronomical phenomenon that ancient Mesopotamian astronomers may have observed and recorded symbolically through these extended reigns. A third theory suggests the numbers served legitimizing functions. By claiming descent from kings who ruled for millennia, later Mesopotamian rulers could assert the ancient pedigree and divine sanction of their authority. The impossibly long reigns would demonstrate that kingship itself was a cosmic principle, established by the gods at the beginning of time. Professor Thorkild Jacobson proposed a different approach, suggesting the king list preserves genuine historical memory encoded in symbolic form. According to this interpretation, the antediluvian kings represent actual historical figures or events, but their reign lengths record something other than chronological time. Perhaps the duration of cultural or technological periods associated with their rules. The Sumerian king list is not unique in ancient literature. Similar patterns appear in other early historical documents from various cultures. The Hebrew Bible records extraordinarily long lifespans for antediluvian figures. Methuselah lived 969 years, while Adam lived 930 years. Egyptian king lists also show patterns of longer reigns for earlier, more mythological rulers. The Hindu Puranas describe cosmic ages lasting hundreds of thousands of years, while early Chinese historical texts record sage kings with impossibly long reigns. This cross-cultural pattern suggests that ancient civilizations shared common approaches to encoding deep time and mythological history in ostensibly chronological documents. However, the Sumerian king list stands out for its mathematical precision and systematic structure. While other traditions present extended lifespans or reigns, few demonstrate the same level of numerical sophistication evident in the Mesopotamian document. Recent archaeological discoveries have provided new perspectives on the king list's historical context. Excavations at early dynastic sites like Tel Es-Awan and Eridu have revealed evidence of complex urban societies existing much earlier than previously thought, potentially corresponding to the periods described in the king list's later, more realistic entries. Cuneiform tablets discovered at various Mesopotamian sites reference some of the kings mentioned in the list, confirming that at least the later entries correspond to historical figures. However, no contemporary evidence has been found for the antediluvian rulers with their impossible reign lengths. Carbon dating and stratigraphic analysis of early dynastic sites suggest that the period of Sumerian civilization covered by the king list's realistic entries spans roughly 600–800 years, a duration that corresponds reasonably well with the document's chronological framework once the symbolic antediluvian period is excluded. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Sumerian king list lies not in its historical accuracy, but in its sophisticated approach to representing concepts of deep time and cultural memory. The document may represent humanity's earliest attempt to reconcile mythological understanding of the past with emerging historical consciousness. The mathematical precision of the antediluvian reign lengths suggests they encode specific information, whether astronomical, genealogical, or cultural in symbolic form. The gradual transition from impossible to plausible reign lengths mirrors the evolution of human society from mythological origins to historical reality. This interpretation positions the king list as more than a simple chronological document. It becomes a sophisticated intellectual achievement that attempts to bridge the gap between mythological and historical time. The anonymous scribes who compiled it may have been grappling with fundamental questions about the nature of time, authority, and human origins that continue to challenge us today. As archaeologists continue to excavate Mesopotamian sites and scholars develop new analytical techniques, the Sumerian king list remains a testament to the complexity of ancient thought. Its impossible reigns may never yield a definitive explanation, but they continue to remind us that our earliest ancestors possessed intellectual sophistication that we are only beginning to understand, encoded in clay documents that preserve mysteries as enduring as the civilization that created them. Deep within the cuneiform tablets of ancient Mesopotamia lies a pantheon of deities whose names have echoed through millennia, but whose true nature has become obscured by centuries of reinterpretation, speculation, and modern mythology that bears little resemblance to their original identity in the world's first written literature. The Anunnaki first appear in the earliest Sumerian texts, dating to approximately 2900 BCE, described not as mysterious visitors or ancient astronauts, but as a specific group of deities within the complex religious hierarchy of Mesopotamian civilization. The term itself derives from the Sumerian Anunnaki, literally meaning offspring of An, and being the sky god who ruled the Mesopotamian pantheon. According to the religious texts discovered across dozens of archaeological sites throughout modern-day Iraq, the Anunnaki represented the older generation of gods who governed the underworld and earth, as distinguished from the Igigi, who were associated with the heavens. This division appears consistently across thousands of cuneiform tablets, from the earliest Sumerian texts through the later Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian periods. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest known work of literature, references the Anunnaki as judges of the underworld who determine the fates of the deceased. In the famous flood narrative within this epic story that predates the biblical account by over a millennium, the Anunnaki are described as divine beings who participate in the cosmic decision to cleanse the earth, but who ultimately weep at the destruction they have sanctioned. The most comprehensive information about the Anunnaki comes from the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic discovered on 7 clay tablets in the ruins of Nineveh. This text, dating to approximately 1100 BCE, but incorporating much older oral traditions, describes the Anunnaki as 300 deities assigned to guard the heavens, with another 300 governing the earth and underworld. Dr. Samuel Noah Kramer, one of the foremost scholars of Sumerian literature, spent decades translating these ancient texts and consistently found the Anunnaki depicted as divine beings within a complex theological system. They appear in royal inscriptions, religious hymns, legal documents, and ritual texts, always as supernatural entities involved in governance, judgment, and cosmic order. The god lists discovered at various Mesopotamian sites provide perhaps the clearest evidence of the Anunnaki's identity. These systematic catalogues of deities, created by ancient scribes for religious and administrative purposes, consistently place specific named gods within the Anunnaki category. Enlil, Enki, Ninhursag, and other major deities are explicitly identified as members of this divine assembly. Archaeological excavations at Mesopotamian temple complexes have revealed extensive evidence of Anunnaki worship. At Eridu, often considered the oldest city in the world, excavators have uncovered temple foundations dating to 5400 BCE, with inscriptions invoking Enki, identified in later texts as a prominent member of the Anunnaki. Similar evidence exists at Ur, Uruk, Babylon, and dozens of other ancient sites. The ancient texts reveal that the Anunnaki serve specific functions within Mesopotamian cosmology. They were not a monolithic group, but rather individual deities with distinct personalities, domains, and responsibilities. Enlil controlled wind and storms, Enki governed fresh water and wisdom, while Ereshkigal ruled the underworld alongside her consort Nergal. These gods were understood by the Mesopotamians to be anthropomorphic beings who experienced emotions, formed relationships, and engaged in conflicts much like humans, but on a cosmic scale. They required food, shelter, and worship from their human subjects, for whom they had created civilization as a means of providing these necessities. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity, as described in texts like the Atrahasis epic, was essentially contractual. Humans served the gods through labor, offerings, and ritual observance, while the gods provided protection, fertility, and cosmic order. This arrangement forms the foundation of Mesopotamian religious thought and appears consistently across 2 millennia of textual evidence. Modern Assyriology, the academic discipline devoted to studying ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, has reached broad consensus about the Anunnaki's identity based on extensive textual analysis and archaeological evidence. They were mythological deities created by human imagination to explain natural phenomena, establish social order, and provide meaning within the world's first urban civilizations. Professor Jeremy Black of Oxford University, who compiled the definitive dictionary of Mesopotamian mythology, emphasized that the Anunnaki represent sophisticated theological thinking rather than historical memories of actual beings. The complexity and consistency of their characterization across multiple cultures and centuries demonstrates the advanced religious and literary development of ancient Mesopotamian societies. The texts themselves provide no evidence supporting interpretations of the Anunnaki as physical beings who interacted directly with humans in historical time. Instead, they consistently present these figures as supernatural entities whose influence operates through natural phenomena, divine inspiration, and cosmic law rather than physical presence. The transformation of the Anunnaki from Mesopotamian deities into figures of modern speculation began in the mid-20th century, largely through the work of authors who interpreted ancient texts through the lens of contemporary science fiction and UFO mythology. This reinterpretation has created a parallel narrative that bears little resemblance to the historical sources. Current archaeological projects across the Middle East continue to uncover new temples, tablets, and artifacts that expand our understanding of Mesopotamian religion. Each discovery adds details to our knowledge of how the Anunnaki were actually understood by the people who created and worshipped them, while simultaneously highlighting the vast distance between ancient reality and modern myth. As scholars continue deciphering the hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets that remain untranslated in museums worldwide, the Anunnaki's authentic voices from humanity's earliest civilizations wait patiently to be heard again, carrying messages from a world where gods walked among the ziggurats and the line between divine and human was drawn in clay rather than speculation. Current archaeological projects across the Middle East continue to uncover new temples, tablets, and artifacts that expand our understanding of Mesopotamian religion. Each discovery adds details to our knowledge of how the Anunnaki were actually understood by the people who created and worshipped them, while simultaneously highlighting the vast distance between ancient reality and modern myth. As scholars continue deciphering the hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets that remain untranslated in museums worldwide, the Anunnaki's authentic voices from humanity's earliest civilizations wait patiently to be heard again, carrying messages from a world where gods walked among the ziggurats and the line between divine and human was drawn in clay rather than speculation. In a dusty storage room of the National Museum of Iraq, a simple clay jar holds the potential to rewrite our understanding of ancient technology, an artifact that, when properly configured, can generate electrical current nearly 2 millennia before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery. The artifact, now known as the Baghdad Battery, was discovered in 1936 by German archaeologist Wilhelm König during excavations near the village of Kuyut Rabua, southeast of Baghdad. Among the pottery shards and household items typical of ancient Mesopotamian sites, König uncovered something that defied conventional understanding of technological development in the ancient world. The object appeared unremarkable at first glance. A terracotta jar, approximately 6 inches tall, with a narrow neck and traces of bitumen sealing around its rim. Inside, König found a copper cylinder that had been carefully inserted into the vessel, with an iron rod suspended within the copper tube. The iron showed signs of corrosion, while the copper remained relatively well preserved despite its estimated age of over 2,000 years. Archaeological context placed the artifact in the Parthian period, roughly 250 BCE to 250 CE, during which this region of Mesopotamia was part of an empire that stretched from the Euphrates to the Indus River. The Parthians were known for their sophisticated craftsmanship, particularly in metalworking and pottery. but nothing in the historical record suggested they possessed knowledge of electrical phenomena. What transformed this archaeological curiosity into a modern mystery was Koenig's recognition of the jar's potential electrical properties. The combination of dissimilar metals, copper, and iron separated by an electrolyte solution represents the fundamental components of a galvanic cell, the basic unit of battery technology. In 1940, American engineer Willard Gray constructed a replica of the Baghdad battery, filling the jar with grape juice to serve as an acidic electrolyte. His experiment successfully generated approximately 2 volts of electrical current, enough to power a small light bulb or deliver a mild electrical shock. Subsequent experiments by other researchers have confirmed these results using various acidic solutions, from vinegar to wine. The electrical output, while modest, demonstrates that the artifact functions as a genuine battery when properly activated. Television producer and engineer Arne Egebrecht conducted perhaps the most famous experiment in 1978, using a replica Baghdad battery to electroplate a small silver figurine with gold in just 10 minutes, a process that would normally require hours using traditional techniques. The success of Egebrecht's experiment led to widespread acceptance of the electroplating theory as an explanation for the Baghdad battery's purpose. This hypothesis suggests that ancient craftsmen used the device to apply thin layers of precious metals to jewelry and decorative objects, creating the appearance of solid gold or silver pieces, while using only small amounts of expensive materials. Archaeological evidence provides some support for this theory. Mesopotamian metalworkers were highly skilled artisans who produced sophisticated jewelry, ceremonial objects, and decorative items for temples and wealthy patrons. The economic advantage of electroplating would have been substantial, allowing craftsmen to create luxury goods at reduced cost while maintaining their appearance and prestige. Several artifacts from the Parthian period show evidence of extremely thin metal coatings that could potentially have been applied through electroplating. However, these same effects can be achieved through fire gilding and other techniques known to have been used in the ancient world, making it difficult to definitively identify electroplated objects from this period. Not all researchers accept the electroplating hypothesis. Dr. Paul Craddock of the British Museum has argued that the electrical current generated by the Baghdad battery would be insufficient for practical electroplating of the complex objects found in Parthian archaeological contexts. The process would require consistent current over extended periods, along with sophisticated understanding of chemical solutions and electrical principles for which no other evidence exists. An alternative theory suggests the device served medical purposes. Ancient physicians were aware of the pain-relieving properties of certain fish that generate electrical shocks, and they may have sought to replicate these effects artificially. Chinese and Egyptian medical texts describe treatments involving electrical phenomena, though none specifically mention battery-like devices. Some scholars propose religious or mystical applications. The mild electrical shock produced by the battery could have been interpreted as evidence of divine power, making the device valuable for temple ceremonies or religious demonstrations. The psychological impact of an apparently magical object that could cause tingling sensations or make metal objects spark would have been considerable in a culture that lacked scientific understanding of electricity. Several prominent archaeologists and historians of technology remain skeptical about attributing electrical knowledge to ancient Mesopotamian civilizations. Dr. Elizabeth Stone of Stony Brook University points out that no other electrical devices have been found from this period, despite extensive excavation of Parthian sites throughout the former empire. The absence of copper wires, additional battery cells, or other components that would be necessary for practical electrical applications suggests that even if the Baghdad battery could generate current, it may not have been intended for that purpose. The configuration could be coincidental, a storage jar for scrolls or other organic materials, with the metal components serving entirely different functions. Furthermore, The archaeological context of the discovery provides limited information. The artifact was found in association with other household items, rather than in a workshop or temple setting where electrical applications might be expected. The lack of detailed excavation records from Koenig's work makes it difficult to draw firm conclusions about the object's original use. Recent scientific examination of the Baghdad battery has revealed additional details about its construction and composition. X-ray analysis shows that the copper cylinder was rolled from sheet metal rather than cast, indicating sophisticated metalworking techniques. The iron rod shows evidence of having been deliberately shaped and positioned within the copper tube. Chemical analysis of residues inside the jar has yielded inconclusive results. While some researchers claim to have identified traces of acidic solutions, others argue that the compounds could result from natural corrosion processes over 2 millennia of burial. The bitumen seal around the jar's rim suggests that it was intended to contain liquid, supporting the battery theory, but also consistent with use as a storage vessel. Electron microscopy of the metal components has revealed microscopic details about their surface conditions and manufacturing techniques, but has not provided definitive evidence about the object's intended function. The metals show wear patterns consistent with use, but the nature of that use remains unclear. The Baghdad battery exists within a broader pattern of ancient technological achievements that challenge assumptions about the linear progression of human knowledge. The Antikythera mechanism demonstrates sophisticated understanding of gear systems and astronomical calculation in ancient Greece, while Roman concrete recipes produce structures more durable than modern equivalents. These examples suggest that ancient civilizations possessed technical knowledge that was subsequently lost during periods of political upheaval and cultural change. The fall of the Parthian Empire to the Sassanids in 224 CE, followed by the Islamic conquest of Mesopotamia in 637 CE, created conditions where specialized technical knowledge could have disappeared without leaving clear historical records. However, the electrical properties of the Baghdad battery represent a quantum leap beyond other known ancient technologies. While mechanical devices and chemical processes have precedence in the ancient world, the practical application of electrical current would require theoretical understanding that seems inconsistent with contemporary knowledge systems. More than 80 years after its discovery, the Baghdad battery continues to resist definitive explanation. Each theory, electroplating, medical treatment, religious ceremony, or coincidental configuration faces significant evidentiary challenges that prevent scholarly consensus. The artifact serves as a reminder that the ancient world continues to hold secrets that challenge our understanding of technological development and human ingenuity. Whether the Baghdad battery represents forgotten electrical knowledge, practical craftsmanship applied to unexpected purposes, or simply an archaeological coincidence, it demonstrates that our ancestors possessed capabilities that we are still working to fully comprehend. As new analytical techniques become available and additional Parthian sites undergo excavation, the possibility remains that future discoveries will finally illuminate the true purpose of this enigmatic device, revealing whether ancient hands once harnessed the power of electricity in ways that history forgot to record. In the Royal Library of Ancient Assyria, cuneiform tablets preserve calculations so precise that modern astronomers use them to correct contemporary star charts. Mathematical achievements that emerged from a civilization that had not yet invented the wheel, yet somehow mapped the cosmos with an accuracy that would not be matched again for over 3,000 years. The first glimpse into Sumerian astronomical knowledge came in 1849, when British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard discovered thousands of cuneiform tablets in the ruins of Nineveh. Among administrative records and epic poetry, translators uncovered something extraordinary: systematic astronomical observations and calculations that revealed a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics dating back to the dawn of recorded history. The most remarkable of these discoveries was the Apin series, 3 tablets containing what amounts to humanity's first comprehensive star catalogue. Compiled around 1000 BCE but incorporating observations stretching back to 2000 BCE or earlier, these tablets meticulously record the movements of stars, planets, and constellations with mathematical precision that astounded modern scholars. As archaeologists excavated more Mesopotamian sites throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the evidence of Sumerian astronomical sophistication continued to mount. Sites like Babylon, and Mari yielded additional tablets containing ephemeris tables, precise predictions of planetary positions that demonstrate observational accuracy, requiring centuries of systematic skywatching. The Sumerian astronomical corpus reveals knowledge that seems impossible given the tools available to Bronze Age civilizations. They identified and tracked all visible planets, distinguishing them clearly from fixed stars and calculating their orbital periods with remarkable accuracy. Venus, which they called Inanna, was tracked through its 584-day synodic cycle with precision that differs from modern calculations by mere hours. More remarkably, Sumerian texts demonstrate awareness of planetary phenomena that should have been invisible to naked-eye observers. They knew that Mercury has 2 different apparent orbital periods, depending on whether it appears as a morning or evening star, a distinction requiring prolonged, systematic observation and sophisticated record-keeping to detect. The Sumerians divided the sky into 3 distinct zones, each associated with major deities. Anu's way covered the celestial equator, Enlil's way encompassed the northern stars, and Ea's way included the southern constellations. This tripartite division allowed them to create accurate star maps and predict the seasonal appearance of specific constellations, forming the foundation of both navigation and agricultural timing. Perhaps most mysteriously, Sumerian texts contain references to celestial mechanics that modern astronomy has only recently confirmed. They describe the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle, caused by Earth's axial wobble with numerical accuracy that suggests continuous observation spanning multiple millennia. The astronomical achievements of the Sumerians were inseparable from their advanced mathematical system. Their base 60 number system, still used today for measuring time and angles, provided a flexible framework for astronomical calculations. This sexagesimal system allowed them to express complex fractional relationships between planetary cycles with elegant precision. Sumerian mathematical tablets reveal sophisticated techniques for calculating compound interest, square roots, and geometric progressions, mathematical tools that proved essential for astronomical work. They developed algorithms for predicting lunar eclipses and created tables showing the varying length of daylight throughout the year at different latitudes. The famous Plimpton 322 tablet demonstrates Sumerian knowledge of what would later be called the Pythagorean theorem, centuries before Pythagoras. This mathematical sophistication provided the computational foundation necessary for their astronomical achievements, yet the gap between their mathematical tools and the precision of their observations remains puzzling. Archaeological evidence suggests the Sumerians built structures specifically designed for astronomical observation. The ziggurats that dominated Mesopotamian cities served multiple purposes, but many incorporated features that would have been ideal for skywatching. Elevated platforms with clear sightlines to the horizon, chambers aligned with cardinal directions, and architectural elements that marked specific astronomical events. At archaeologists have identified what appears to be an ancient observatory within the temple complex dedicated to Nanna, the moon god. Stone foundations show evidence of instruments that may have been used for measuring celestial angles, while inscriptions describe priests whose primary duty was recording stellar observations. However, no clear examples of sophisticated astronomical instruments have survived from Sumerian sites. The precision of their observations seems to have been achieved through patient naked-eye observation combined with ingenious mathematical analysis, raising questions about how they compensated for the limitations of human perception. Sumerian astronomical knowledge served practical, religious, and administrative purposes that were deeply integrated into their civilization. Accurate calendars were essential for agricultural planning in the flood-prone regions between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Predicting celestial events reinforced the authority of priest-kings who claimed divine sanction for their rule. The Sumerian creation epic, Enuma Elish, describes the establishment of astronomical order as a fundamental act of divine creation. Marduk, the chief god, established the stations of the great gods and set up constellations corresponding to them. This mythological framework provided religious motivation for centuries of systematic observation, yet the precision of Sumerian astronomy exceeded practical necessity. Their calculations contain details that would have been unnecessary for agricultural or religious purposes, suggesting that some observations were pursued for their own sake, perhaps representing humanity's first instances of pure scientific inquiry. When compared to other ancient civilizations, Sumerian astronomical achievement stands out dramatically. Egyptian astronomy, despite producing impressive monuments like the pyramids with their precise celestial alignments, focused primarily on solar observations and calendar keeping. Chinese astronomical records, while extensive, began systematically only in the Han Dynasty, over a millennium after peak Sumerian achievements. The Babylonians, who inherited and expanded upon Sumerian astronomical knowledge, are often credited with founding mathematical astronomy. However, their sophisticated planetary theories and predictive models were built upon foundations laid by their Sumerian predecessors. The continuity between Sumerian observations and later Babylonian mathematical astronomy suggests an unbroken tradition of sky-watching spanning over 2 millennia. Contemporary astronomers have verified many Sumerian astronomical claims using modern computational methods and historical reconstruction. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has confirmed the accuracy of ancient planetary position tables, while studies of ancient eclipse records have helped refine our understanding of Earth's rotational changes over historical time. Computer simulations of ancient skies have revealed that Sumerian constellation boundaries and star positions align closely with actual celestial configurations as they would have appeared 4,000 years ago. This verification process has simultaneously validated Sumerian observational accuracy and deepened the mystery of how they achieved such precision. The discovery that Sumerian numerical constants relating to planetary cycles match modern values to within fractions of a percent suggests observational programs spanning centuries and involving multiple generations of dedicated observers, an achievement that implies institutional stability and cultural commitment to astronomical study that seems almost unprecedented in human history. The mystery of Sumerian astronomical knowledge extends beyond their observational achievements to fundamental questions about the development of human scientific thinking. How did a civilization in humanity's technological infancy develop such sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics? What motivated them to pursue astronomical study with such dedication and precision? Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new facets of Sumerian scientific achievement while deepening existing mysteries. Each translated tablet and excavated observatory adds to our understanding of their capabilities, while raising fresh questions about the origins of systematic scientific observation. The Sumerian legacy in astronomy reminds us that human intellectual capability has remained essentially constant throughout recorded history, while the tools and context for applying that capability have varied dramatically. Their achievements suggest that the foundations of scientific thinking were laid not in classical Greece or Renaissance Europe, but in the muddy fields and reed-built cities of ancient Mesopotamia, where patient observers first began the systematic study of patterns hidden in the eternal dance of stars across the night sky. Carved into stones no larger than a human thumb, ancient artisans created miniature masterpieces containing more narrative complexity and artistic sophistication than many museum paintings, intricate scenes that served as personal signatures, but whose elaborate details seem to encode meanings far beyond simple identification. The first cylinder seals came to Western attention in the mid-19th century, when French consul Paul-Émile Botta began excavating the ancient Assyrian capital of Khorsabad. Among the monumental sculptures and architectural fragments, his team discovered small cylindrical stones covered with what appeared to be random scratches and marks. Only when these objects were rolled across soft clay did their true nature become apparent. Each seal contained an entire world in miniature. As archaeological expeditions spread across Mesopotamia, thousands of these enigmatic objects emerged from sites spanning over 3 millennia of human civilization. From the earliest examples dating to around 3500 BCE through the Persian conquest in 539 BCE, cylinder seals represented one of humanity's longest continuous artistic traditions. Yet their purpose remained puzzling in its complexity. The basic function seemed clear enough. When rolled across wet clay, the seals produced distinctive impressions that served as signatures, identifying documents, marking property, and authorizing transactions. In a largely illiterate society, these visual signatures provided crucial authentication for legal and commercial activities. Yet this practical purpose failed to explain the extraordinary artistic sophistication evident in even the most common examples. What transformed these utilitarian objects into archaeological mysteries was the recognition of their incredible artistic detail. Under magnification, cylinder seals reveal narrative scenes of breathtaking complexity. Gods battling monsters, elaborate religious ceremonies, mythological tales unfolding across curved surfaces no larger than a modern lipstick tube. The level of craftsmanship required to create such images defies simple explanation. Working with tools no more sophisticated than copper needles and abrasive powders, ancient artisans carved figures smaller than rice grains with anatomical accuracy, emotional expression, and narrative coherence. Individual faces show distinct characteristics. Textile patterns reveal intricate weaves, and architectural details include accurate representations of contemporary buildings. Dr. Dominique Collin of the British Museum, who spent decades cataloguing cylinder seals, noted that many contain artistic elements invisible to the naked eye, details that would only become apparent when the impression was made, and sometimes only under magnification. Background figures, secondary narrative elements, and decorative patterns often exhibit craftsmanship exceeding that of the main subjects, suggesting artistic motivations beyond mere identification purposes. The narrative content of cylinder seals presents an additional puzzle. Rather than simple identifying symbols or personal emblems, most seals depict complex mythological scenes requiring extensive cultural knowledge to fully interpret. The Epic of Gilgamesh appears frequently, with multi-figure compositions showing key moments from the story across the seal's surface. Religious scenes dominate many seals, but these often go far beyond simple devotional images. They include theological arguments rendered in visual form, showing relationships between deities, cosmic hierarchies, and ritual procedures with scholarly precision. Some seals appear to contain visual commentaries on religious texts, translating abstract theological concepts into concrete artistic form. Perhaps most mysteriously, many seals contain what appear to be autobiographical elements, personal references, embedded within mythological narratives. Figures sometimes appear to represent the seal's owner participating in divine events, suggesting these objects served as more than simple signatures, but as statements of personal identity and cosmic position. The technical sophistication evident in cylinder seal production raises additional questions about their purpose. The finest examples were carved from extremely hard stones, hematite, lapis lazuli, and carnelian materials requiring specialized tools and techniques to work effectively. The time investment for creating a single elaborate seal would have been substantial, often representing weeks or months of skilled labor. Chemical analysis of seal materials reveals international trade networks spanning from Afghanistan to Egypt. Lapis lazuli, prized for its deep blue color, traveled over 2,000 miles from mines in modern Afghanistan to workshops in Mesopotamian cities. This suggests that cylinder seals represented significant economic investments, far exceeding what would be justified for simple identification purposes. Microscopic examination has revealed sophisticated techniques for achieving different textural effects within single compositions. Artisans varied their carving depth, tool selection, and finishing methods to create visual hierarchies and emphasize different narrative elements. The level of technical control demonstrates training and expertise that would have required years to develop. The distribution of cylinder seals across Mesopotamian society provides clues about their complex purposes. While the most elaborate examples belong to royalty and high officials, even relatively modest seals show sophisticated artistic sensibilities. This suggests that the detailed artistry served functions beyond status display or wealth demonstration. Archaeological evidence indicates that cylinder seals were often inherited across generations, with some examples showing evidence of modification or addition by successive owners. This pattern suggests that the seal's detailed iconography carried meaning that transcended individual ownership, perhaps encoding family histories, professional identities, or spiritual affiliations. Business archives discovered at sites like Kanesh in Turkey contain thousands of seal impressions on commercial documents. Analysis reveals that merchants often use different seals for different types of transactions, suggesting that the detailed iconography communicated specific information about the nature of the business being conducted. Several theories attempt to explain the extraordinary detail evident in cylinder seals. Some scholars propose that the intricate scenes served mnemonic functions, helping pre-literate societies preserve and transmit complex cultural information across generations. The visual narratives would encode religious teachings, historical events, and social relationships in forms that could be accurately reproduced and interpreted. Dr. Jeremy Black suggested that cylinder seals functioned as portable temples, containing compressed versions of religious art and symbolism, normally found in monumental architecture. This theory explains both the theological sophistication of seal iconography and the careful attention to detail that would be necessary for religious efficacy. Another interpretation suggests that the seals served as protective amulets, with detailed imagery designed to invoke specific divine protections for their owners. The complexity would thus serve magical rather than artistic purposes, with every element contributing to the seal's spiritual effectiveness. Recent technological advances have revealed previously hidden aspects of cylinder seal artistry. Digital microscopy and 3D scanning have uncovered details invisible to previous generations of scholars, including evidence of painting, selective polishing, and other surface treatments that enhanced the seal's visual impact. X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy has identified trace elements in seal materials, providing information about their geographical origins and manufacturing techniques. This analysis has revealed sophisticated knowledge of material properties and careful selection of stones for specific artistic effects. Computer-generated unrolled impressions have allowed scholars to study complete narrative sequences without the distortions introduced by manual rolling. This process has revealed previously unrecognized narrative structures and artistic conventions, suggesting even greater sophistication in seal design than previously understood. Despite decades of intensive study, fundamental questions about cylinder seal artistry remain unanswered. Why did ancient artisans invest such extraordinary effort in objects whose primary function could have been achieved through simple geometric patterns? What cultural values supported the development of such sophisticated miniature art forms? The relationship between artistic detail and practical function in cylinder seals challenges modern assumptions about ancient craftsmanship and social organization. These objects suggest that aesthetic considerations played crucial roles in ancient societies, even in purely utilitarian contexts. As archaeological excavations continue to uncover new cylinder seals and digital techniques, reveal previously hidden details in existing collections, each discovery adds new dimensions to our understanding while deepening the central mystery. The seals remain testimonies to human creativity and technical skill, preserving in imperishable stone the artistic achievements of civilizations that valued beauty highly enough to embed it in the most mundane aspects of daily life. Perhaps the true purpose of cylinder seals' intricate details lies not in any single explanation, but in their demonstration that for our earliest urban ancestors, the boundary between practical necessity and artistic expression was far more fluid than we might imagine. A reminder that the human impulse to create beauty may be as fundamental as the need for identification itself. In the basement archives of the British Museum, clay tablets hold humanity's earliest written account of a world-destroying flood, a story that predates the biblical narrative by over a millennium and raises profound questions about whether our oldest literature preserves the memory of an actual catastrophe that shaped human civilization itself. The discovery began in 1872, when Assyriologist George Smith was cataloguing cuneiform tablets from the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. Among thousands of administrative records and royal inscriptions, Smith encountered something extraordinary: a detailed account of a great flood, complete with a hero who builds a massive boat to save his family and representatives of all living creatures from divine wrath. The parallels to the biblical story of Noah were unmistakable, but the implications were staggering. This Mesopotamian account, inscribed as part of the Epic of Gilgamesh, had been written in cuneiform script around 1100 BCE, centuries before the earliest biblical texts. For the first time, scholars confronted the possibility that one of the Bible's most fundamental narratives might have Mesopotamian origins. As excavations continued throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, additional versions of the flood story emerged from sites across ancient Mesopotamia. The Atrahasis epic, discovered at various locations, contained an even more detailed flood narrative dating to around 1800 BCE. The Sumerian flood story, found at Nippur, pushed the literary tradition back even further to approximately 2100 BCE. The literary evidence for ancient flood narratives coincided with intriguing archaeological discoveries throughout the Mesopotamian region. At Leonard Woolley's excavations in the 1920s revealed a thick layer of waterborne silt, separating different cultural strata evidence that seemed to support the historical reality of a great flood. This stratum, dating to approximately 2900 BCE, contained no artifacts or cultural remains, suggesting a period when human habitation ceased entirely. Above and below this sterile layer, Woolley found clear evidence of continuous occupation, indicating that whatever event created this deposit was temporary but catastrophic enough to interrupt civilization in this region. Similar flood deposits were discovered at other Mesopotamian sites, including Kish, Uruk, and Shuruppak, the very city that Sumerian texts identify as the home of Ziusudra, their flood hero. However, dating analysis revealed a puzzling pattern. The flood layers at different sites corresponded to different time periods, spanning several centuries, rather than indicating a single catastrophic event. The Mesopotamian landscape itself provides crucial context for understanding flood narratives. The region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers represents one of the world's most flood-prone environments, where seasonal deluges regularly reshaped the landscape and threatened human settlements. Ancient Mesopotamian cities were built in a region where rivers frequently changed course, where spring snowmelt from distant mountains could cause devastating floods, and where storm surges from the Persian Gulf occasionally push seawater far inland. For populations living in this environment, catastrophic flooding was not a theoretical possibility, but a recurring reality. Geological studies of the region have identified evidence of numerous major flood events throughout the 3rd millennium BCE. Core samples from the Persian Gulf show layers of freshwater sediment, indicating massive river discharges during this period. Climate data suggests that changing weather patterns around 3000 BCE could have created conditions for unprecedented flooding across the entire Mesopotamian basin. Comparing different versions of the Mesopotamian flood story reveals how the narrative evolved across cultures and centuries. The earliest Sumerian version presents a relatively simple account. The gods decide to destroy humanity with a flood. One man is warned and builds a boat, and life is preserved to repopulate the earth. The later Akkadian versions, including those found in the Atrahasis epic and the Epic of Gilgamesh, add complexity and theological sophistication. They include explanations for why the gods decided to send the flood, detailed descriptions of the boat's construction, and elaborate accounts of the flood's aftermath. These additions suggest ongoing development of the tradition rather than simple preservation of ancient memory. The relationship between these various accounts raises fundamental questions about their origins. Did they all derive from a single historical event, preserved in oral tradition and elaborated over time? Or do they represent independent responses to the recurring reality of flooding in Mesopotamian civilization? The flood narrative's appearance in multiple ancient cultures compounds the mystery of its origins. Beyond Mesopotamia, similar stories appear in Greek mythology, Deucalion's flood, Hindu texts, Manu's flood, and numerous other traditions worldwide. This global distribution has led some researchers to propose that all flood narratives derive from a common source, possibly the post-glacial flooding that occurred around 10,000 BCE as ice sheets melted and sea levels rose dramatically. However, the specific details linking Mesopotamian and biblical flood accounts suggest more direct cultural transmission. The biblical narrative includes elements that make little sense in the geographical context of ancient Israel, but are perfectly logical for Mesopotamian conditions, such as the use of bitumen for waterproofing, a material abundant in Mesopotamia but rare in the Levant. The Hebrew account also preserves technical details about boat construction that appear to derive from Mesopotamian shipbuilding traditions rather than the naval practices of ancient Israel. This suggests that the biblical narrative was consciously adapted from Mesopotamian sources rather than representing independent cultural memory. Modern scientific techniques have provided new tools for investigating the historical foundations of flood narratives. Radiocarbon dating of flood deposits, paleoclimatic reconstruction, and analysis of sediment cores from the Persian Gulf have created detailed pictures of ancient flooding patterns. The most intriguing discovery involves evidence of rapid sea level changes in the Persian Gulf around 5000 BCE. As post-glacial melting concluded, the Gulf's shoreline stabilized roughly 120 miles north of its previous position, potentially flooding vast areas of inhabited coastal plain. Computer models suggest this flooding could have occurred rapidly enough to create the kind of catastrophic event preserved in flood narratives. Sediment analysis from deep-sea cores shows evidence of massive freshwater discharges from the Tigris-Euphrates system during various periods, indicating flood events of unprecedented scale. However, these geological markers correspond to different time periods, making it difficult to identify a single event that could have inspired the literary tradition. Scholars have proposed several theories to explain the origins of Mesopotamian flood narratives. The historical memory hypothesis suggests that the stories preserve actual memories of catastrophic flooding, possibly the post-glacial flooding of the Persian Gulf or specific river floods of unusual severity. The mythological synthesis theory proposes that the narratives represent theological responses to the recurring reality of flooding, using specific flood events as frameworks for expressing broader religious and philosophical concepts about divine justice, human behavior, and cosmic order. A third possibility involves the convergent evolution of flood narratives in response to similar environmental challenges. Societies living in flood-prone regions might independently develop similar explanatory narratives, with later cultural contact leading to the harmonization and cross-pollination of originally separate traditions. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to add complexity to questions about flood narrative origins. Excavations at Tel Es-Sawan have revealed evidence of sophisticated flood management systems dating to 6000 BCE, suggesting that Mesopotamian societies were dealing with major flooding long before the earliest written flood accounts. Climate reconstructions based on ice core analysis and marine sediment studies show that the period from 3500 to 2500 BCE was characterized by unusual climatic instability in the Near East, with evidence of both severe droughts and catastrophic floods. This environmental context could have provided the historical foundation for flood narratives, while also explaining their theological emphasis on divine judgment and renewal. The question of whether Mesopotamian flood accounts preserve actual historical memory or represent purely mythological constructions remains unresolved. Each new archaeological discovery and scientific analysis adds detail to our understanding, while simultaneously revealing the complexity of the cultural and environmental factors that shaped these ancient narratives. As researchers continue excavating Mesopotamian sites and developing more sophisticated techniques for analyzing ancient environmental conditions, the possibility remains that future discoveries will finally determine whether humanity's oldest flood stories preserve the echo of actual catastrophe or represent the purely imaginative response of ancient minds to the eternal challenge of living with the power of water to both create and destroy. Within the cuneiform libraries of ancient Mesopotamia lie descriptions of divine beings traversing the skies in mysterious vehicles accounts that have sparked modern speculation about advanced technology, yet whose true meaning may reveal more about the spiritual imagination of humanity's earliest urban civilizations than about ancient engineering achievements. The foundation for claims about Mesopotamian flying machines rests primarily on translated passages from ancient cuneiform texts, particularly those describing the activities of the Anunnaki and other divine beings. The Epic of Etana, one of the world's oldest literary works, contains vivid descriptions of flight, including the protagonist's journey to heaven on the back of an eagle to obtain the plant of birth. In this narrative, composed around 2100 BCE, Etana rises so high that the earth below appears first as a mountain, then as a hill, and finally disappears entirely. A sequence that some modern interpreters have suggested reflects actual aerial observation. However, the text consistently frames this journey in mythological terms, with the eagle serving as a divine messenger rather than a technological device. The Enuma Elish, Babylon's creation epic, contains references to Marduk's ability to travel swiftly across great distances and his possession of various divine implements. Later Assyrian texts describe winged beings and divine chariots moving through the heavens. These descriptions have been cited by proponents of ancient technology theories, but their interpretation requires careful examination within their original cultural context. Despite extensive excavation across Mesopotamian sites spanning over 150 years, archaeologists have uncovered no physical evidence supporting the existence of flying machines or advanced propulsion technology in ancient Mesopotamia. The archaeological record provides detailed information about Mesopotamian engineering capabilities, including sophisticated irrigation systems, architectural innovations, and metallurgical techniques, but nothing approaching aeronautical technology. The material culture recovered from sites like Ur, Babylon, and Nineveh reflects a Bronze Age civilization with remarkable achievements in urban planning, mathematics, and astronomy, but one firmly grounded in the technological possibilities of its time. Transportation methods evidenced in archaeological remains include boats, wheeled vehicles drawn by animals, and human porterage technologies consistent with other ancient civilizations. Professor David Owen of Cornell University, who has spent decades studying Mesopotamian administrative archives, notes that the thousands of economic texts from sites like Drihem and Pusrish Dagon contain detailed inventories of livestock, agricultural products, and craft goods, but no references to materials or crafts that would be associated with advanced technology. The bureaucratic precision of these records makes it unlikely that significant technological achievements would have gone unrecorded. Understanding ancient Mesopotamian concepts of divine transportation requires examining them within the broader context of Near Eastern religious thought. Throughout the ancient world, gods and supernatural beings were regularly depicted as possessing abilities that transcended normal physical limitations, including the power of flight. In Mesopotamian art, divine beings are frequently shown with wings, not as technological appendages, but as symbols of their supernatural nature and ability to move between the earthly and celestial realms. The winged disc symbol, found throughout Mesopotamian iconography, represents divine presence and authority rather than mechanical flight devices. Dr. Jeremy Black, who compiled the definitive dictionary of Mesopotamian mythology, emphasized that ancient Near Eastern literature consistently employs fantastical elements to convey theological and philosophical concepts. The ability of gods to fly, like their ability to control natural forces or live for millennia, represents their fundamental difference from mortal humans rather than advanced technology. Many claims about Mesopotamian flying machines stem from problematic translations and interpretations of ancient texts. Cuneiform writing employs a complex system of logographic and syllabic signs that can have multiple meanings depending on context. Words describing divine vehicles, ceremonial objects, or architectural features have sometimes been translated in ways that suggest technological sophistication not supported by the original language. The Akkadian term riksu, for example, can mean binding, bond, or vehicle, depending on context. When applied to divine beings, it might refer to ritual paraphernalia, symbolic attributes, or metaphorical descriptions of divine power. Similarly, terms describing divine radiance or aura have sometimes been interpreted as descriptions of mechanical propulsion or energy sources. Professor Simo Parpala of the University of Helsinki, a leading authority on Akkadian language and literature, has documented numerous instances where modern translators have imposed contemporary technological concepts onto ancient texts, creating interpretations that would have been incomprehensible to the original authors. The interpretation of Mesopotamian texts as describing ancient technology gained prominence in the mid-20th century, particularly through the work of authors who approached ancient literature through the lens of science fiction and UFO speculation. This reinterpretation movement coincided with the space age and reflected contemporary fascination with aerospace technology and extraterrestrial life. These modern interpretations typically focus on isolated passages removed from their literary and cultural contexts, emphasizing descriptions of divine beings, unusual phenomena, or technological-sounding terminology, while ignoring the consistently mythological framework within which such descriptions appear. Scholars note that similar reinterpretation patterns have affected other ancient literatures, with Greek myths, Hindu epics, and biblical texts also being reread as technological accounts, despite clear evidence of their symbolic and religious purposes. The concept of divine flight appears across numerous ancient cultures, suggesting it represents a universal human attempt to conceptualize supernatural power rather than shared technological knowledge. Egyptian texts describe gods traveling in solar barks across the sky. Greek mythology features flying horses and chariots of the gods, and Norse literature includes flying ships and airborne steeds. This cross-cultural prevalence of flight mythology reflects common human experiences and psychological patterns rather than shared technological traditions. The dream of flight, the observation of birds, and the desire to transcend earthly limitations appear to be universal aspects of human imagination that find expression in the religious literature of diverse civilizations. Modern aerospace engineers who have analyzed descriptions from ancient Mesopotamian texts find no evidence of practical aeronautical principles or technological concepts that would enable actual flight. The descriptions, when examined from an engineering perspective, lack the technical specificity and physical consistency that would characterize genuine technological documentation. Furthermore, the materials and energy sources available to Bronze Age civilizations would have been insufficient to support powered flight, even if the theoretical knowledge had existed. The metallurgical capabilities evidenced in Mesopotamian artifacts, while sophisticated for their time, fall far short of what would be required for aircraft construction. Rather than representing ancient technology, Mesopotamian flight narratives appear to serve important cultural and religious functions. They establish the cosmic authority of deities, provide frameworks for understanding divine intervention in human affairs, and create literary devices for exploring philosophical questions about the relationship between earthly and celestial realms. The Epic of Etana, for example, uses the flight narrative to explore themes of fertility, royal authority, and the relationship between human ambition and divine will. The story's meaning emerges from its symbolic content, rather than from any technological elements it might contain. The enduring appeal of interpreting ancient texts as descriptions of advanced technology reflects fundamental human fascination with both the achievements of our ancestors and the possibilities of transcending current limitations. However, this fascination should not overshadow the genuine achievements of ancient Mesopotamian civilization or the sophisticated literary and religious traditions they created. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal the remarkable sophistication of Mesopotamian mathematics, astronomy, law, and literature without finding evidence of anachronistic technology. Each new translation project and excavation adds to our understanding of these ancient people's actual achievements, while simultaneously demonstrating the consistency of their technological level with their historical period. As scholars continue deciphering the hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets that remain untranslated in museums worldwide, the possibility exists that new discoveries will further illuminate ancient Mesopotamian concepts of divine power and cosmic travel concepts that may continue to challenge our understanding of how our ancestors conceived the relationship between human limitation and divine transcendence. Even as they confirm that their feet remained firmly planted on the ground they had learned to cultivate so well. In laboratories around the world, modern scientists armed with electron microscopes and spectrometers struggle to recreate metalworking techniques that ancient craftsmen mastered using nothing more sophisticated than charcoal fires and hand-forged tools. Achievements that challenge our fundamental assumptions about technological progression and the capabilities of pre-industrial civilizations. The most celebrated example of lost metallurgical knowledge lies in the legendary Damascus steel. Renowned throughout the medieval world for its exceptional sharpness, flexibility, and distinctive watered pattern. Forged in the workshops of Damascus, Syria, these blades could allegedly cut through European armor and slice falling silk scarves with equal ease, properties that modern metallurgists have spent decades attempting to understand and reproduce. Damascus steel was crafted from wood steel, a high-carbon crucible steel originally produced in India and Sri Lanka. The raw material traveled along ancient trade routes to Damascus, where mastersmiths transformed it into weapons prized by warriors from the Crusades to the Ottoman Empire. The steel's unique properties emerged from its microscopic structure, a complex arrangement of carbides and cementite that created natural composite materials at the molecular level. When European colonial powers disrupted traditional trade routes in the 18th century, the supply of genuine Wootz steel ceased, and the techniques for working it gradually disappeared. Despite centuries of investigation, materials scientists only began understanding Damascus steel's true structure in the 1980s, when electron microscopy revealed carbon nanotubes and carbide nanowires embedded within the metal matrix nanotechnology, achieved through empirical knowledge and careful temperature control. Standing in the Qutb complex in Delhi, a wrought iron pillar dating to the 4th century CE presents another metallurgical puzzle. Rising over 23 feet and weighing more than 6 tons, this monument has resisted corrosion for over 1,600 years, despite Delhi's monsoon climate, an achievement that seems impossible given the pillar's composition and environmental exposure. Modern analysis reveals that the Delhi pillar contains remarkably pure iron, with minimal carbon content and unusual phosphorus distribution. As the iron oxidizes, the phosphorus forms a protective layer of mesowite that prevents further corrosion, a process that ancient Indian metallurgists somehow understood and controlled without modern chemical knowledge. The pillar's construction required maintaining precise temperatures across its entire length during forging, ensuring uniform phosphorus distribution while preventing carbon contamination. This level of process control suggests sophisticated understanding of iron behavior that European metallurgists would not achieve until the Industrial Revolution, more than 1,000 years later. Chinese metallurgical achievements stretch back over 3 millennia, encompassing innovations that predate similar European developments by centuries. The Chinese mastered cast iron production around 500 BCE, using blast furnaces that achieved temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius, technical capabilities that would not appear in Europe until the 14th century. Archaeological excavations at Huma in Shanxi province have revealed foundries from the 5th century BCE containing evidence of sophisticated alloy production. Chinese craftsmen created precise bronze compositions for different applications, harder alloys for weapons, more malleable compositions for vessels, and specialized formulations for bells that produced specific musical tones. The Chinese also pioneered steel production techniques, including the co-fusion process that combined wrought iron and cast iron to create steel with controlled carbon content. Han Dynasty texts describe detailed procedures for achieving different steel qualities, suggesting empirical knowledge of metallurgical principles that Western science would not formally understand until the 19th century. Perhaps the most puzzling metallurgical achievement comes from pre-Columbian South America, where indigenous cultures worked platinum, a metal that European technology could not process until the 18th century. Archaeological sites in Ecuador and Colombia have yielded platinum artifacts dating to 100 BCE, crafted using techniques that remain partially mysterious. Platinum melts at 1,768 degrees Celsius, far exceeding the temperatures achievable with traditional furnaces. Yet ancient South American craftsmen created intricate platinum jewelry and decorative objects, often incorporating gold and other metals in complex alloys. They achieved this through powder metallurgy, mixing platinum dust with gold particles and heating the mixture until the gold melted and sintered the platinum particles together. This technique required precise understanding of metal behavior, temperature control, and alloying principles. The craftsmen had to extract platinum from placer deposits, reduce it to powder, and blend it with other metals in exact proportions, all without written formulas or scientific instruments. The sophistication of ancient metallurgical techniques raises fundamental questions about how such knowledge developed and spread. Unlike other crafts where trial and error might eventually yield improvements, metallurgy involves complex chemical and physical processes that seem to require theoretical understanding for successful implementation. Archaeological evidence suggests that metallurgical knowledge often appeared suddenly in various cultures without obvious developmental stages. The transition from copper to bronze, for example, required understanding that adding tin in specific proportions would create an alloy superior to pure copper knowledge that seems to have emerged independently in multiple regions. Some scholars propose that metallurgical techniques spread through trade networks and cultural contact, carried by itinerant craftsmen who guarded their secrets carefully. Others suggest that empirical experimentation conducted over generations gradually yielded understanding of metal behavior without formal scientific theory. Contemporary efforts to recreate ancient metallurgical techniques have met with mixed success, revealing the depth of knowledge embedded in traditional practices. MIT's Materials Science Department spent years attempting to reproduce authentic Damascus steel, achieving limited success only after combining historical accounts with modern analytical techniques. Similarly, attempts to recreate ancient Chinese cast iron techniques required extensive experimentation with furnace design, fuel composition, and temperature control. Even with modern instruments and scientific understanding, researchers found it challenging to achieve the consistency and quality evident in ancient artifacts. These reconstruction projects have revealed that ancient metallurgists possessed intuitive understanding of complex physical and chemical principles. They knew how to control carbon migration in steel, manage oxidation and reduction reactions, and manipulate crystal structures through precise heating and cooling cycles. Knowledge that modern science can explain, but that ancient practitioners developed through careful observation and experimentation. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal unexpected sophistication in ancient metallurgy. At Çatalhöyük in Turkey, excavators have found evidence of copper smelting dating to 6000 BCE, suggesting that metallurgy began much earlier than previously thought. In China, excavations at Sanxingdui have revealed bronze artifacts of extraordinary complexity, including masks and sculptural elements created using advanced lost wax casting techniques. The precision and artistry of these objects demonstrate mastery that rivals modern capabilities. African sites have yielded evidence of sophisticated iron production, including natural draft furnaces that achieved remarkably high temperatures through ingenious design rather than mechanical assistance. These discoveries challenge assumptions about the geographical origins and development patterns of metallurgical knowledge. What emerges from studying ancient metallurgy is recognition of the power of empirical knowledge understanding gained through systematic observation and experimentation, rather than formal theory. Ancient metallurgists developed techniques through generations of careful practice, building knowledge systems that achieved remarkable results without scientific terminology or mathematical models. This empirical approach often produced innovations that formal science would later validate and explain. The phosphorus content in Delhi pillar iron, the carbon nanotube structures in Damascus steel, and the powder metallurgy techniques of South American craftsmen all represent solutions to metallurgical problems that modern science recognizes as theoretically sound. As archaeologists continue excavating ancient workshops and scientists develop more sophisticated analytical techniques, each discovery adds new dimensions to our understanding of ancient metallurgical capabilities, while deepening appreciation for the knowledge systems that produce such achievements. The mystery of advanced ancient metallurgy ultimately reflects the complex relationship between theoretical understanding and practical skill. These ancient craftsmen remind us that human ingenuity and careful observation can achieve remarkable results even without formal scientific frameworks, leaving us to wonder what other sophisticated knowledge might be embedded in traditional practices that modern science has yet to fully understand or appreciate. The techniques they mastered through patient experimentation continue to challenge our assumptions about technological development, suggesting that the path from empirical knowledge to scientific understanding may be far more complex and non-linear than we typically imagine.